Hey everyone, welcome back to Thursday's Theology. My name is Pastor Jeff and I'm your host, and we are back with another episode of Christ and Quarantine. And today I am joined by my fellow theologian and youth worker and partner growing up, I guess, my younger brother Jeremy. So that was a weird way of phrasing that.
Yeah, partner growing up. I mean, I guess like,
Yeah, I mean it's not
brother. Just
like yeah.
I expected brother before you said theologian and youth worker. So
Well, you got
maybe
to.
that's the tiered system though. It's like okay, first we bond on
Mhm.
theology, second youth ministry, third I guess we're brothers.
Which probably means we need to work on that hierarchy.
Yeah, we can probably like get a book about it or something.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, all that to say, welcome back to another episode of Christ in Quarantine. I am joined by my younger brother, Jeremy. Jeremy, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where do you serve? All that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Yeah, so my name is Jeremy. I am Jeff's partner from growing up. Um, I currently serve at First Presbyterian Church of Berkeley as their middle school associate is my title, um, but I work with the middle schoolers and also with the high schoolers on occasion. But my focus is middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, live in Berkeley. Quarantine in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot of good views of the apartment that I live in right now.
Nice. And
Yeah.
for
Any
those of
other
you,
questions?
yes. So, well, actually, a question that's kind of in jest. So, for those of you who don't know, I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad, and Jeremy went to UCLA. So we have this constant back and forth, about go Bears, go Bruins, and stuff like that. I would just like to say that I think it is divine irony that where you live is pretty much within the shadow of the Campanile at UC Berkeley.
On a calm night, we hear the Campanile
Nice,
um, from where we live, straight up.
nice.
Um, Also, though, I could flip the script on you.
Mm-hmm.
You live closer to UCLA than you do Cal Berkeley.
That's true, but I'm still very far away from UCLA.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so Jeremy, what we've been doing on this series is we've had various people on to answer the question, "What has Christ been teaching you during quarantine?" So that is the question I'm going to pose to you, and wherever the conversation may lead from there, that's where it leads. But for everybody out there, Jeremy, what has Christ been teaching you during quarantine?
Great question. Um, I think that a more succinct answer will probably come as we talk about it and tease it out more. But
Mm-hmm.
I think mainly what I've been learning is that it, energy is sacred. That probably sounds very vague right now, but
Okay.
um, something that I think will describe it a lot better is when quarantine first hit, I was in a funk, arguably still am. I think anyone who says they're truly thriving in quarantine,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, fantastic if you are. That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of us are probably finding ourselves in ongoing funk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was just in a staff meeting at one point, and I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling in a funk and like not feeling creative and what you have to do to get out of a funk is just to get out of a funk." Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think navigating that and figuring out, okay, like this is how much energy I have for today, and not and having to offer myself and offer others grace when you just have an off day,
Yeah.
and understanding that that's all part of the process.
Yeah.
Um,
Agree with that because I think that, to be honest, I think in my experience, at least in quarantine here in Santa Barbara, I feel like I've had more days of being in a funk or feeling off than I have feeling good and feeling like, yeah, I got this, you know?
Mhm.
And it just seems like that's kind of the motif of our current season, is that no matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, it's still going to be overshadowed by the fact that we can't do things in person. We have to restrict our access to things. We have to always keep constantly go through the mental and emotional and spiritual hurdles of how to do youth ministry well in a season of shelter in place.
Right. And I mean, yes, definitely true of youth ministry. I'll share a story about that in just a second, but just true of like living life, right? Like,
Yeah.
it almost everything has just been harder in this last season. Um, and that's not to say that it's without joy, not to say that it's without high moments, but like, things are just more difficult. Relationships are strained in ways that they usually aren't.
Yeah.
And kind of to what you were saying just earlier, it's like the hurdles are there. I don't know if I'm unique in feeling this way when it comes to like larger events, specifically talking about youth ministry events here, but like, the hour and a half leading up to something, for me, it's usually less excitement, and not because I'm not excited about an event, but it's usually filled more with a nervous energy, like an anticipation.
Oh yeah. 100%. I have the same thing.
Okay. So yeah, I don't think we're unique in that. I think a poll across youth workers might, you might hear similar stories to this.
Right.
But I think with COVID specifically, and I know youth groups are doing a million different things across a million different cities. But we're doing everything virtually. So we'll have our weekly small group calls. And again, leading up to that hour, it's this nervous anticipation feeling, but also there's no break or no clear build up to it. For me, it's just like, okay, like doing this one thing, sending this email, working on this project. Okay, it's 5 minutes before the call. Let me log in,
right?
Or let me prep the material I have.
And I think what you're getting at too is like there's pre-COVID, there was almost like a ritual you would go through to prepare for a youth group night. You would get to the space early, you would set up, you would get everything in a row, you would have like mentally get there. But with Zoom calls and virtual headspace, because you're doing like, at least for me, I would go to the youth room, I would go to the church campus, I would go to the place we were having games. But now that everything's taking place in our houses and in our homes, it's harder to have that same ritualistic preparation. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I think it's true regardless of level of preparation. Because I think there is a conversation to be had for like, oh, you just need to create new ritual space.
Sure.
Which is true. And it's hard to create ritual space because it requires discipline. It requires buy-in from all parties involved. In this case, it would just be like buy-in from like me or from you.
All right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. And then on the back end, there's no mingling after youth group.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, 8:30, boom, call ends. Like, oh, okay, well,
yeah,
I guess youth group's over.
Yeah, and that's been a weird thing to navigate for me too, of like the times that you bond with students might not necessarily be in small groups. It's more likely going to be the time before, the time playing the game, and the time hanging out afterwards and talking. I mean, I remember when I visited you in your youth group, oh gosh, last fall, I think it was. And
Yeah.
I came and I guess spoke, and I remember staying for almost 45 minutes after group with a group of seniors who had questions for me. And like that is the time that you bond with the students. But like it just seems like virtually that's not the case, especially, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but I've noticed too that since students are tuning in from home, open up and feel comfortable and safe enough to share some of the things that are going on for fear of being hurt by a sibling or by their parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that there could definitely be elements of that um, in the students I work with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the lines are being blurred of who you are and where you are, that person or that version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we all have the you'll hear it in like sermon talks, like we all have our masks that we wear. Like, okay, but it's true that I act in different ways when I'm with different people, and not in malicious um, or deceitful ways. That's just the case.
Yeah.
So for students, for us, for anyone grappling with what quarantine looks like, working from home takes on a very different form than it does from going into the office.
Mm-hmm.
Um, doing school, whether you're in elementary, middle school, high school, college, whatever, doing that from home looks different. That's kind of I think why there's the standoff at times of online degrees, of which I have done.
Me too.
You, whether it's someone telling you this narrative or you're telling yourself this narrative,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to feel to have this feeling of, okay, well, what I'm doing isn't really real.
Right.
It's virtual. Like my degree, I didn't go into campus. I'm doing it online.
Right.
And I think especially now that in the COVID world that we live, something I've am continuing to tease out and learn is just like, yeah, doing my job looks different now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've brought this up before with other guests that have been on, but I have joked with people that I must have missed the seminary class on how to do youth ministry during a pandemic.
You and me both.
Just because like I've learned, especially I think it was with I went to seminary. He was in seminary at the same time we were, but I don't think you ever had classes with him. He was a guy named TJ De La Garza. And he was my guest last time on or one of the times previous on Christ in Quarantine. And we were just talking about how just being online and having to learn how to take an entire relational ministry and put it online has been difficult. Because I don't know about you, but for me, the first couple of weeks, especially of lockdown, were super stressful for me because I started to play the comparison game of like, it seemed that every other youth group and every other youth pastor had this like wonderful nuanced like Bible study on Zoom, youth group via Zoom, like this really good Instagram game, and all these things. I'm ready to go, like they were anticipating it. So I felt lost in trying to figure out like, how do I take this ministry and put it online, because I've always done ministry from a relational lens. I've very rarely had this like virtual space to interact with students, and it was difficult. It was, and it is difficult still. to try and do things that you would do normally virtually.
Yeah. One of my big agendas when I first got hired on at First Pres was to bring them the game 9 Square. For those of you listening that don't know 9 Square, if you've ever played 4 Square on the schoolyard, it's that, but with 9 squares, and it's above you in the air.
Okay.
Hence
so
the
almost
name.
like volleyball.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But the full name of this game, 9 in the air. It's a very straightforward with what it is. Getting back to the point of the story, one of the things I did first was like, okay, we're going to invest in a 9 Square set. And it's not because 9 Square is some like magical youth ministry game, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot of fun, and it's easy to play and interact with students in that space.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I just think to myself during quarantine, I'm like, man, I just miss that time.
Yeah.
I look forward to it when we can do that again.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that you had a story about youth ministry that you wanted to tell. Did you already get to it, or?
That's a good question.
I forget what we were talking about.
Yeah, me too, man. I think I did. I think it was just that idea of like, to get out of a funk, you just gotta get out of a funk.
Right.
Which could sound very like demeaning, I think, but also I think there's an element of truth in it.
Sure.
It's like sometimes all you have to do is just get up. You don't have to do a whole lot more, but like sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the things that I've really had to learn, I mean, I've learned a lot of things during quarantine. But one of the things I think I've had to learn, especially over and over, because I haven't learned it yet, is how to temper my expectations. Because for me, I tend to always set an unrealistic expectation of myself and my abilities. So I had to learn how to not be this critical perfectionist when it comes to doing ministry, because the truth is this is uncharted territory. Like there is no metric to measure what success looks like. I mean,
right.
I've texted students, I've kept in contact with students, they've contacted me, so that's a success. So I have to relearn what these metrics are for a season where normal metrics are just thrown out the window.
Right.
And I think for me, just having to temper my expectations of like, I had one Zoom night that had 17 people, and I was like, yes, this is great, awesome. The next week it had like 8. So like there's just no telling what success is, or so yeah. So Jeremy, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us the time. I actually have a hidden agenda for having you on, and project. So why don't you tell the viewers about what?
Yeah. So Jeff and I, being partners in our childhood, he's roped me into another project having to do with Thursday's Theology, an offshoot of it, you might say, entitled The Grain Offering, where we'll be hanging out talking about different books of the Bible while also sipping on a nice beer to pair it with. I would say hence the name, the grain offering, but like, you'll have to listen to get a larger scoop on what we're actually talking about.
Yeah. And as we are recording right now, we've already shot the first episode, the first 2 episodes actually. And I got to tell you, the viewers, it's probably the most fun I've had with the Thursdays Theology channel so far. Even with playing video games, even with all that stuff, sitting and having a beer, talking about the Bible with my partner growing up has been a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to it. The grain offering will be coming out soon-ish, I guess. I don't have an exact release date, but it'll be out soon. So check it out. Make sure you subscribe to Thursday's Theology to know when we go live with the grain offering, and you will be seeing a lot of me and Jeremy throughout that series. So Jeremy, thanks again for joining us, giving us the time and talking to us. Really, really appreciate it, man. I miss you. Give your wife a hello for me. And for everybody else, thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. My name's Pastor Jeff. I've been your host. And remember, theology doesn't always have to be difficult. It is simply the study of who God is. Take care. We'll see you next time.